500 years ago, bodies and spices are stolen from the continent of Africa as part of the transatlantic trade, and they're transported across the ocean for sale in the ports of the islands of the Antilles. And what's interesting in how the drink changes is while it was a beverage that was brought by enslaved Africans, it was greatly influenced by the indentured servants that were also in those islands. And so if you went to a place like Jamaica, which had a high population of Chinese indentured servants, you would get a version of this drink with hibiscus, but with ginger and cardamom and allspice. And of course, rum, because everything in Jamaica is rum. If you went to a different island where they had different influences, like Trinidad and Tobago, they had a high influence of East Indian indentured servants. So you got additions like cinnamon and clove and nutmeg. Not as much alcohol. The Trinis aren't as big a drinkers as the Jamaicans. So every island comes up with a different version of this based on the spices that are being traded in their ports. And here's the interesting part is there were no recipes. There were no recipes for centuries because the people who were making this weren't allowed to read or write. So if you didn't see your grandmother or your mother do this, you didn't know how to do it. It was passed on orally. So hibiscus is incredibly tart. It's got great acidity, and there's this full floral fruit note in it that is really difficult to balance, which is why the other botanicals come into play. Depending on what island you go to that's making this, you will find people that are in their own way trying to balance off the acidity of the hibiscus. Oh, and this is the fun part. I had a cancer scare. I was making a version of this in my kitchen, like a good Caribbean boy for almost 20 years, did not think twice about it. And then 13 years ago, I had a cancer scare. My doctor found a tumor inside my spine, size of a golf ball. He said, "You have a 95% chance of death and a 50% of paralysis if you live. You should organize your paperwork." That's the phrase that they say when they really don't get your attention. Get your papers in order. Uh, Short version is I lived. Yay! But I call what happened to me a gift because it gave me an opportunity to rethink my priorities in life. I had 25 years invested in corporate America, so it wasn't a question of whether I was going to live. Like, I was going to live, but what was I going to do with myself now that I had this opportunity? And I decided that I'd spent enough time in an office to last a lifetime. And what I really wanted to do is day drink. I just want to meet interesting people in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week. I want to have great conversation over great food and beverage, and I wanted to monetize it. And when I couldn't think who was going to pay me to do those things, I launched a liquor brand with the thought, how hard can it be? It turns out it's harder than I'd anticipated. I actually talked to a spice importer. Uh, I made it a point to actually try to learn from people who knew things I did not know, which is kind of everyone. uh, my spice importer told me that the quality of a botanical is a lot like the quality of a grape varietal in that they draw properties from the soil. So hibiscus grows in this narrow equator band across the world. So you can get it in Africa, in Mexico, in Hawaii, in the Caribbean. But the Caribbean version it's a tropical climate, so the flowers don't have to work as hard to draw nutrients out of the soil. While they're delicious, they're less robust. I've used Sudanese, Egyptian, and currently Moroccan hibiscus, and you can actually tell that they're really working to get nutrients out of the soil. There's a much greater minerality to the flower. They've cut through the mix much better. So again, the the places we chose our botanicals from were based not on a particular fondness for a region of the world, but for the fondness of their soil. One of the things that no one wants to talk about in our industry is the fact that alcohol does not taste good. And that is a hill that I have to stand on as someone who has been a distiller and been in many distilleries. Alcohol straight off a distill, if you don't even cut it right, the wrong cut will kill you. But humans want to enjoy the effects of alcohol, so we spent thousands of years trying to figure out how do we make this potable. If you ask me what my job is, the joke I tell people is I make tiny amounts of poison potable. So what do we do with this alcohol? Do we put it in a cask for 6 months? Do we put sugar in it? Do we add herbs and botanicals to it? Big Liquor has decided that the way to solve this problem is to take vast amount of alcohol and add flavor to them. So we got cinnamon flavored whiskey and blueberry flavored tequila and habanero flavored vodka. We reverse the logic. They're all taking alcohol as a start and adding flavor. We start with flavor and add alcohol. Flavor is always the most important component, and alcohol is a stabilizing agent. Here's another nice thing about starting with flavor. The basis of what you're trying to do. The first thing is because it's a neutral grain, it mixes with literally everything. You can use Sorel with vodka, mezcal, tequila, whiskey, rye, bourbon, scotch, sake. It mixes with everything. It is color to splash onto your cocktails and bring new life to them. So I believe Sorel might be the most seasonally relevant beverage there is, in that it's delicious hot or cold. So it's cold outside in Brooklyn right now. So if you serve Sorel hot, all of the beautiful floral notes take a backseat to the baking spices, and it's just warm and inviting. So right now, we're serving toddies. In the springtime, we get lots of gin cocktails and lots of agave cocktails. So I've seen the Sorel Bee's Knees. I've seen the Sorel Paloma. We've seen the Sorel Margarita, very popular for springtime. In the summertime, what we see are spritzers and slushies and mules. The Sorel Hibiscus Mule is very popular. In the fall, we see the stirred cocktails. So Negronis, Old Fashions, Manhattans. Anywhere that you might think to use a vermouth, there's a greater depth that sort of fills in the spaces between the flavors that you didn't know weren't there. When people taste Sorel, I want them to taste the joy and the temerity and the perseverance of the people who kept this recipe alive just under the worst possible conditions. I want people to taste the flavor of the Afro-Caribbean community. I want people to feel an emotional connection.